Welcome to the Real Advisor Podcast. TRAP, TRAP. Please follow us and join in the conversation on Twitter @Advisor Podcast, where you can suggest ideas and themes you'd like the TRAP team to discuss. Also remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave a 6 out of 5-star review on iTunes. Doing all this really helps us, which means we can do more to help you. Now let's head over to the studio for the latest pile of TRAP.
Yes, indeed, dear Trappists. Welcome back to what many people are calling episode 42 of the Real Advisor Podcast, TRAP, TRAP. My name is Lick Ninken, and joining me, as ever, in the digital studio of doom are the three other horsemen of the apocalypse. Andy Hart, Carl Della Voce, the voice widger.
Hello.
And Alan, absolutely brimming to the rim with stories, Smith. Now, gentlemen, we have a show packed full of absolutely nothing. So let's start unpacking it straight away with some more high-energy review reads read out by my good friend, the Right Honourable Mr. Andrew Hart.
Thank you, Nick. Okay, so first up is a review from Sean Lowsome entitled A Must Listen for IFA's 5 stars. Brilliant podcast, especially for those relatively new to the profession such as myself. The hosts always cut through any nonsense in the profession and make good points based on solid facts and examples. A must listen for any IFA, 6 out of 5 stars. Sean Lowsome of Waverton Wealth in Edinburgh. Final review from Paul Bradley, slightly longer this one. Great value, adding show from 4... Great value-adding show from 4 clearly great financial advisors and great friends. So this is a review from Paul Bradley at Chiltern Hills Financial Planning. He's been asked many times by his colleagues if he listens to TRAP. The answer is always a resounding yes. This is a high-quality conversation from 4 real financial planners who are not only at the top of their game, but also clearly great friends. And he adds so much to the profession: content, podcast, training, conferences. Alan is one of the best financial services content creators I've ever heard. Nick says something I didn't think was smart. Don't quite get that. Carl the voice comes across as everything that's good about Ireland. The best part of the show is the edgy banter that you get between friends and the ability to laugh with and at each other. Essential listening for any financial planners or would-be financial planners. Sorry, sometimes the grammar in these reviews is horrendous. So
that was so smooth, Andy.
You
butchered that.
We didn't notice, Andy. We got through that, but nobody noticed.
Yeah.
Right,
thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Trappists, for the reviews. Thank you for those. They do mean a lot to us. Please do keep them coming.
We are going to run
6 out
out
of 5 stars on
quite
iTunes.
soon.
Like and subscribe to us on YouTube. If you can stop talking under me, that'd be great. We're only a minute in. I'm going to kill somebody shortly. Okay, let's go on to topical tidbits. Now, Alan, I know you're starting up a separate podcast, Holiday Recollections, but for the moment, crack on and tell us your recent adventure.
Pour yourself a drink, a very long drink.
Not doing this early.
I've been told to be very brief about this, so I will be. As we mentioned in the last episode, I set off an adventure called the Arctic Circle Rat Race, which is, long story short, you fly from London to Tromsø, northern Norway. You then get in a coach and drive 3 hours north of that into Finland. And then you begin what is effectively a 3-day adventure crossing the snow and doing about 80 kilometers on foot. Day one is by something called a fat bike, which I've never been on before. Supposedly designed to cycle across snow. Well, it doesn't because the snow's too thick and the bike weighs a ton. You end up pushing it up snow and through the wind for a long time. That was tough. Day 2 is on cross-country skis, which I've never been on before in my life, and they're harder than they look. And that is just traversing across the snow for great distances. And day 3, which I thought would be the easiest, was arguably the hardest, which is with snow shoes, which are these, specially designed shoes for walking across snow. And the trouble is, every so often you fall through the snow. There's great big bloody holes in it, and you fall down to waist deep. And it takes every effort under the sun to wrench yourself out of the snow and climb back up again. You can't bloody breathe. And so, why the hell did I do it? And I thought many a time as I was going through, or kilometer 15 or something, and I'm nearly halfway through on day 1. Why the hell do I do it? But I've done a few of these kind of adventures before. Climbed Kilimanjaro a few years ago, And that was tough. Well, certainly the summit of Kilimanjaro is really tough because it's at altitude, so it's hard to breathe. And it's really steep and it's icy and it's pitch black. This was much harder. I have to say, this is much harder for me anyway than climbing Kilimanjaro. In fact, quite a lot of people on this trip are kind of people who do a lot of extreme things. I don't do many, but some people do this all the time. There was a guy who's just done 3 marathons in 3 days, which is quite a push. And he said this was harder. This was quite a bit harder than doing the 3 marathons. So It was physically challenging. Obviously, it was mentally tough.
Did anyone drop out?
Well, they make it, no one dropped out completely, but they do make it, they allow you to, there's snowmobiles driving around support. And if you feel you can't go on, they'll pick you up. They'll either drive you to the next station or they'll take you home or something. And a few people did that, or they just sort of missed parts of it. But it was all done very subtly. You didn't really know. I did, because I was looking at the only few people who were behind me. And I thought, there's no one behind me anymore at certain times. So they support you completely to do it. I did all that was required because I'm kind of obstinate that way. Certainly wasn't the fastest, but wasn't the slowest either. But I think for me anyway, I do these things from time to time because I like having some sort of goals to work towards. I did sort of up my training regime a bit in the months leading up to it. I was doing more exercise, more sort of hill sprinting and stuff like that, trying to get fit. I mean, just going to a gym or something with no real goal or ambition, I think it's a bit like financial planning. Actually, you need to have a goal to head towards. Otherwise, you're just saving in a vacuum. I think it builds resilience to do these sort of things. It proves how strong you can be. I think a lot of I'll speak for myself. I think I live a fairly cosseted life. It's not too tough, thankfully, most of it. And this was tough because of the conditions. It makes it it's absolutely bloody freezing. As long as you were moving, it's fine. But you stop moving, you stop for a break, you get cold really quickly. My hands get really, really super cold. So I think it helps build strength and resilience. And I've definitely had a sense of achievement. You cross the finishing line. There's a sense of achievement. So it was a bucket list item. It's ticked off. It's done. It's great. I wanted to do it. Finally, Nick, there is a brief shout out. You like this, I think. There was 25 or so on the group, of which 3 others of which I knew. They're close personal friends of mine. Keith, Charles, who's a colleague of mine here, and Paul, all work in financial services. Keith made me laugh. Some of you guys will know Keith from IX, currently works at a large national advice firm. And he was talking to him about Trap. And he says, I love Trap. In fact, I gifted him a hat, the famous Trap.
Oh yes,
hats that they got, and he was delighted with it. He said he goes running a lot, and he says he listens to Trap in his headphones whilst he's running along. And he said, and often he says, I'm running along through the park and I'm bursting out laughing. I'm just laughing my head off at various comments that people are making. And everyone's looking at me saying, God, that guy must really enjoy running. He's going around the park laughing his head off about something. So shout out to Keith. Thanks for being a loyal Trappist and a colleague on this Arctic adventure. That was it. Great fun.
He also took the greatest photo I have ever seen. That photo you shared with us with the Northern Lights. It was amazing. You sent some amazing pics from it.
Yeah.
Well done. Fair play.
Yeah, seriously.
Well
done.
Fantastic.
I'm not sure I could do that. So that's
do you want to just briefly mention?
You couldn't, Nick.
Do you want to just briefly mention the McDonald's, Alan?
The McDonald's, what? The most northern McDonald's in the world.
Yeah. You stocked up there before the first day.
Yeah. I didn't actually go into the McDonald's. I went to Burger King instead. But it's
the most northern Burger King.
It must be. I can't imagine there's a more northern
discerning
Burger King than that.
Very good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Very good,
it'll be
mate.
fun. You guys should go next year.
No chance. Absolutely zero chance.
All right.
Okay, moving on. So I run this thing called the IFA Forum, this Google group, and it's got...
You don't, do you, Nick?
You've
never mentioned that before. Oh, you have.
Tiny.cc/IFA Forum. Anyway, there was a thread on there about JICEs, junior ISAs. I'm not sure, Carl, you got the equivalent in your neck of the woods.
No, we
but-
don't. No.
Okay, you know what they are. The money reverts absolutely to the kids at 18. They're just another cretinous example of how civil servants shouldn't be allowed anywhere near personal finance. And it's just a thread about this, how all these advisors and the clients of these advisors are just trying to hide JICEs from their children and the things they're getting up to. And some IFAs in the chat saying, "Yeah, I'm doing the same thing. Logging into the platforms and changing their password and not telling the kids." And it's just they are a completely ridiculous product. And I try and avoid them.
Examples of it working very well, Nick, and getting children to invest early, to understand how investing works. They become 18, they're responsible for money, they're learning a money lesson. It's not all bad news. So
no, it is bad news. You can do that with an ISA. You can do that with an ISA in the client's name, child's name. You don't do it with a JISA.
Do they automatically convert? I haven't paid much attention to this.
Yes,
do they automatically convert to a full ISA and then they begin to write to the child or the
I've got one at the
18-year-old?
moment. The client's 17 and a half and they want to anyway, so by the time they're 18, Transact say, it just turns to an ISA automatically. They become a client. We send them a login details and remove it from the parents.
But doesn't that tell you a lot about the child or the parenting if he can't be trusted?
Well, because on the IFA forum, a lady was concerned with the behaviour of the child that's now going to receive the JISA. So it's an anecdote. Obviously, it's a bad story.
All right,
so
you get the odd child who's kind of a bit wayward.
Yeah, exactly.
Getting a few thousand quid in their hand at age 18 might not be
I wouldn't.
ideal.
I'd have been a disaster with 18, whatever. At 18, if I'd been given a lump sum of money, without a doubt. I mean, now you see a mature, successful businessman in front of you. But back then, I was not quite as polished. Okay, moving on. Ultra online tax returns.
Some of your clients or people you come across might need to get caught up in having to file tax returns now because of the changes in tax legislation, etc., etc. There is a website called Taxed, spelt taxd.co.uk, that's doing tax returns for super cheap. Check it out; it might be useful for you. It's a little bit like those sort of low charging will writing services, suitable for some people, not for others. So again, you might come across someone that needs to return, file a tax return, and their accountant saying, "Yeah, we can do it for 900 quid for you to declare £90." It doesn't make any sense. So maybe check it out. There's a link in the so-called show notes. Back to you, Nick.
And I'm thinking about this because the lovely Penelope, she's a head teacher, so she's a 40% taxpayer, and she's never done a self-assessment, and I just don't trust HMRC to get anything right. And I'm always thinking, should she do a self-assessment? Are they taking note of her contributions to her final salary pension scheme? Is that coming off her taxable income? And I'm always on the cusp of doing it, but then once you're in that enmeshed in that system, I always think it's very hard to get out of it as well. And you're doing it every year. I don't know. You'd like to have faith and just think everything's been done right, wouldn't you? I mean, she's clean as a whistle, pay as you earn. She's got no other incomes or assets.
I suppose for UK advisors listening to this, there might be situations where their clients triggered a CGT bill.
Yeah, that's the one.
And in order to do it simply, this might be a potential solution. So check it out, taxd.co.uk.
Okay, superb. Voice, Metis, charity run.
Yeah, so I just thought I'd mention this in terms of potential ideas for advisory firms to run events. So this one is, I can take no credit for it. Ronan Quealy, my colleague here, he's big into his park runs and that kind of stuff, and said, how could we introduce something like this to Metis and maybe help a charity out. So basically what we're doing is in Limerick City on the 11th of April, 5k fun run, and it's 20 quid to register, and all the money goes to Cleanest Foundation, who I've mentioned before. They're a charity who help families with sick kids. Do you know what? It's we're hoping to get kind of 100 people at it, which would be really cool. It's, Ronan won't say this, of course, right? But it's pretty easy to organize, right? It's pretty cost effective. We're giving kind of T-shirts to people. Metis are covering all the costs. All the money will go to the charity. And then afterwards, we're hoping to kind of get a lot of the business community from Limerick City there. Afterwards, we'll sponsor, a bite to eat and a few drinks and that kind of stuff. So really simple, and it's a little bit different from your game of golf or you're going to a match, and just to change things up a little bit. And obviously there'll be all types of serious runners, and people who'll just walk it as well will come.
Would you want a famous extreme sportsman to potentially rock up as a special guest? I think Alan's free that weekend.
No. We would, of course, love Alan Smith to come over here.
5k for Alan is nothing. He'd turn that down. It's not big enough challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's great effort.
Yeah,
from,
well done
from the team in Metis. Well done, Mr. Smith. Total returns.
I thought this was quite an interesting article, actually, sort of just confirming something that we probably all know, but it was explained quite well on a blog post on the Timeline website written by Robin Powell with some other data points within it. And it just made me think about, it was about the FTSE 100 specifically as an index. So many commentators on social media, we know who they are, we know the names, often reference the FTSE 100 as having effectively gone nowhere for the best part of 20 years. The index still sits around whatever it is, 7,700 or so right now. And it's gone nowhere. But of course, like most indices, which are quoted, it is it's a price-only index. So whatever the number is of the price, and it goes up by that price over time. So it looks like it can stay fairly static. And of course, it ignores one of the biggest, most important aspects of any index or any sort of equity type investment, which is the dividend returns. FTSE 100 is known to be a fairly highly paying dividend index.
3.5%, 4% typically.
About 3.8, I think 3.7, 3.8
Yeah,
right now. And if you
moment.
ignore those sort of returns, 3.5 to 4% compounded yearly, it's going the information quote is clearly going to be misleading. They actually quote a number that says the FTSE is around about 7.7. If you quote going back over 30 years, if the dividends were included in that, guess what the index would be as a number? If you included that as a compound over the period of time, I'll put you out your misery. 32,477. So gone from whatever it was over 25 years, it would be compounded return, including the dividends, over 32,000 as an index. And it's the same for the S&P and most other indexes. I think the German and the Brazilian one are including dividend payments.
I've always wondered that about the DAX, because the DAX does outperform the FTSE and the CAC. That's why.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So it does put to let's face it, FTSE 100 would have been a relatively underperforming index compared to, of course, the S&P with all the sort of tech companies over the last 20, 30 years. But nevertheless, it's very misleading just to say it's gone nowhere.
I think the period they were referring to was 38 years, just to put some accuracy on it. Just quoting the article. Over to you, Nick.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you. So, 21st of March, 1924, an ex-pots and pan traveling salesman in the US came up with a marvelous creation that has transformed the lives of millions of people around the world. And he gave us in the financial planning profession, it's really our oxygen. We're so immersed in what this man invented that we don't really see it. We just take it for granted. Edward Leffler, the pots and pans traveling salesman, somehow, and the details on this are scant, and I'll explain why in a minute, he came up with the idea of a mutual fund, of investors pooling their money together and a firm buying underlying securities with that pooled money and unitizing it, and creating units and then selling units when clients wanted to get out and sell. Edward Leffler, the mutual fund. And now you think about what we do, everything that we do in terms of planning for our clients and investments is via mutual funds, be that in ISAs, be that in pensions, be that in life assurance bonds. And this guy, Edward Leffler, who no one's heard of, created it 100 years ago. And there's an excellent article in the FT, which I'll put a link to in the so-called show notes, talking about the rise of them. $63 trillion globally are in this man's creation, and no one's heard of him. I went onto his Wikipedia page. It's like a paragraph. It's not even his date of birth or date of death. And I don't know, it's just staggering, really. This guy's not better known. And also staggering that, as far as I'm aware, the financial services press didn't cover this at all. Now, you could say, well, okay, he created it, but somebody else would have done it. You're absolutely right. You can say the same thing about Merrill Lynch and the first ever index tracking fund, and then John Bogle, on the back of that. But the people that make these first things are the people we look up to. And I want to thank Edward Leffler. I don't know when you were born, my friend. You're long dead, but thank you. Your gift keeps on going. And now, our clients can buy the great companies of the world through a couple of funds for peanuts on the pound. It's just remarkable.
It's magic.
Even 40 years ago, you'd have to go to a stockbroker and they'd put together a portfolio of underlying shares for you. There were unit trusts 50, 40 years ago, but they were very limited. And now it's just an absolute gift. You can buy world capitalism for nothing, thanks to Edward Leffler. So wherever you are, my friend, hopefully you're up there. You're north, not south. Thank you. And we all swim in your ocean. You've given us that gift. Okay. Any thoughts about that? Shall I move on?
There should be a statue of him in the City of London. We go there every
There
year
should
and just,
be. It's incredible.
just bow down in
I've
front of
never
him
heard-
and thank him
I'm
for his good work.
surprised. I don't think he was mentioned. We talked before about the Robin Wigglesworth book, where the whole history. And I mean, that's the history of indexing, I think. But he does track it back to, I can't remember. There's a French mathematician that came up with this. He's probably
right, yeah.
There's probably a few people that were sort of contributed to the idea over time. I don't think it was one individual who just did it. He sort of built upon it. But no, I'd never heard of him before, and I don't.
The only thing that predated him in this country, we had investment trusts, which started in about the 1870s, but there was their closed-ended funds, and
Right.
Mr. Leffler came up with the idea for these open-ended funds. You know, where you could redeem units when you needed to sell, and it's him. We're just all immersed in his world, and he's enriched millions of people who have been able to access global capitalism easily, quickly, with liquidity, and in today's world at almost no cost. It's a bloody gift. And I don't, sometimes we just don't see it because we're so immersed in it. So there we go. Right. Oh, yes, Mr. Hart. Cash flow modeling, that thing that we talk about, which I think so few actually do.
Yeah, so cash flow modelling is something that's been going on for decades, I suppose, in various different geists, but now it's coming to the fore and the regulator is taking a keener eye or a keener look at it. And they came out of a recent article entitled Undertaking Cash Flow Modelling to Demonstrate Suitability of Retirement-Related Advice. Long story short, to be fair to them, it's quite a decent article, really, the way they've gone through it. I mean, to start off with, I think it was as a result of a lot of DB transfer work where people were using cash flow modelling or financial forecasting to demonstrate the suitability of transferring from a DB world to a DC world. So they obviously wanted to take a closer look at it. But then they start off the article with many firms use cash flow modelling. I mean, please tell me how on earth you can advise, an individual or a couple about their retirement without using some sort of forecasting spreadsheet calculator or thing. Oh, yeah, you're going to be fine in your retirement, or I think you should save more for your retirement. There's no context to it. So I think they need to be a bit more forceful with the language they use around this. But anyway, moving on from that. And then it's got examples of good practice, bad practice, and it's just split into various different sections. It's not that long. It'll take you about 10 minutes to read it. I reckon it's worth you having a look. Experienced financial planners who have been financial forecasting with their clients for years, we're very aware of the limitations. We're very aware of the pros of using it, and we know the impact that it has. I've been building financial plans now for 14 years with my clients, and often in client meetings now, I'll go back 10 years ago and I'll say, 10 years ago, this is where we said you're going to be in 2014. Do you want to play it, Nick?
We've had this before, haven't we?
Andy, the ultra crepidarian Andy. He knows about everything, Andy. Can't be told anything. His name is Andrew Hart. Andrew Hart!
So, yeah, to summarise, it's a decent article. Those of us who've been doing this for a while know, how useful this type of software technology is to implement in your real financial planning business. And it's scary how accurate I've been from 10 years ago telling clients where they're going to be in 2024.
I'm not playing it again.
As we know, a lot of the problems in this industry exist on fictitious spreadsheets and in the brains of consultants. Real planners seeing real people, experience things in a completely different way. But yes, worth checking out the article. Over to you, or has anyone got any points?
Do they talk about this? I think I skim read it. The difference is kind of, what's it called? Like linear projections versus, is it deterministic projections versus
not really.
stochastic? And the limitations of a voyant or similar with just assuming the same compound growth year by year versus something.
Abraham's got a bee in his bonnet about this. You can look at bloody Monte Carlo and your timeline. That's all based on past performance. You've got to make some assumptions.
There's no facts about the future. Yeah, you need to do something.
This is art. We keep on saying it. I think a lot of the knacks think this is a science, and you can rationalise this down to the nth degree. You can't. And they get upset.
Well, you can look at a lot
points.
of the variability of the assumptions. You can look at sequence risk. You can look at more things with a more stochastic type model. What if we had? You could do it in Voyant as well. You'd have to just be very specific about the, I guess you call it a scenario plan. What if we had negative returns for 5 years? What if this? What if that?
So in specific reply to your question, Alan, no, this article doesn't mention the limitations, pros, cons of linear versus stochastic. And again, something like sequence risk obviously predominantly exists in spreadsheets and in the minds of consultants. You know, show me a real client that's had an impact of sequence risk. I mean, yes, I had loads of clients that retired in 2020. Where's the real impact? Oh no, but I'm going to show you a spreadsheet of a fake client who invested in the perfect day to end up ravaging their portfolio in retirement. It's like, that's on a spreadsheet. Where's the real people? That's what stresses me out with it. Anyway.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Andy, on that, like that's what the review process is all about. Like
iterations, having a safety net, cash.
And you do that year on year on year.
You know, sequencing risk ravages every portfolio on a spreadsheet.
And the other thing about the advice that we do give our clients is, you know, it's take the complexity out of it for them, as opposed to adding complexity in and making them worry all the time. We had a client recently who we brought on board 8 years ago, and this is exactly what you're saying, Andy. They're now transitioning into that third act, right?
Yep.
And the comment the couple made was, it is actually amazing that this plan has transpired as we thought it would.
Honestly, it's scary how accurate it is.
Yeah, and for sure, it's a little bit different because there's been tweaks along the way, and you know they've maybe some of the goals have changed, but we've brought them on the journey, and they're now transitioning into the third act, and they were like, you know, super, I suppose, chilled out about the whole thing because they knew 2, 3, 4 years ago this was going to happen, and it did happen, and that's why I don't believe in all those, you know, Monte Carlo and all that stuff. It's like, let's view this as a process and just keep reviewing.
Nick.
Thank you. I mean, as I read an article from a Georgia, Atlanta-based advisor called Russ Thornton, a good guy in the States, and he said, you know, he said what we always say: it's the planning, not the plan. Clients want the verb; they don't want the noun. That's what I like. They want the verb, not the noun. It's the planning, right? You're adjusting the flight path all through the years to get the clients to their financial nirvana.
Absolutely.
The plan is stillborn. The plan is dead in the water the moment the meeting's over. The planning, the verb, is where the action is, Daddy-o. Right, good. Carl, thank you for agreeing with me, even though you're muted. I could see your lips moving. I think that was a positive commendation. Okay, for the 89th time, Metis Island, are you hiring?
We are. So I put this in because we are hiring at the moment. So we'll have a couple of jobs going up and have a look at our website. And the reason I put it in, because I know there are tons and tons of younger and very young advisors or people starting out in their career as financial planners. So look, if you are Irish, you are listening, please keep an eye out. We'd love to hear from you. That's it.
Metis Island, keeping the Irish economy afloat with another couple of hires. That's quite a few hires you've been making the last year or so.
Uh-huh. And they'll also see that I was deeply uncomfortable with the content of some of today's podcast, owing to the Irish versus UK cultural differences.
Every time I play that, we get demonetized by YouTube. So there you go.
I don't even know what that means.
All right.
Neither do I, but they tell me.
We don't make any money in the first place.
It reminded me about the rugby. Thanks very much for reminding me about. We won the championship again, and
you scraped over the line. Let's be honest, you scraped over.
It was all just a little bit muted because, frankly, we're devastated we didn't do the Grand Slam. Very, very disappointed. But
why did you not do the Grand Slam? Who beat you?
Can't remember, Andy.
Okay.
A team in
corral this
white jersey.
Corralling this back. I'm corralling it back. Okay. We mentioned how cash flow to us, and I think a lot of the Trappists is just, you know, it's integral. It's baked into us, and to do our job without cash flow is, how do you do it? Certainly, how do you provide an ongoing financial planning service without doing annual updates to the financial plan and the cash flow? I do not know, but I think a lot of advisors, and I think, you know, the last episode we talked about this a little bit around St James's Place. If you think St James's Place are the only people who are going to suffer from this burgeoning story about people paying for advice, ongoing advice, and not getting it, I've got a bridge to sell you. And Mr. Smith, the thematic review of our regulator, fees for no service.
Well, it's not specifically about that, but they do reference it. Let me just start at the beginning. There is a new thematic review which was issued last week, by the FCA on the subject of retirement planning, retirement income advice. It's about 56 pages. I've read them all. I've highlighted parts. It's a worthwhile read. All of it is right at the sort of sharp end of where I think all of us operate. So in line with the style that the FCA have got used to doing now for many years, and I think they do it pretty well, in all fairness, they have a theme, that the various themes that they are focusing on. They see this, they quote some incredible numbers, incidentally. The future for financial planners worldwide, I mean, the UK is just highly positive. The number of people that are reaching age 65 over the next 10, 20 years is just vast. But I think by 2050, a quarter of the UK population will be over age 65. All of them will need some sort of guidance, advice, varying levels. Very simplistically, they'll need some nudges and guidance along to the right,
isn't
the right
it
decisions.
In the US, 10,000 people a day hit age 65.
Something
so
like that.
Yeah,
the numbers. This is obviously
2,000 a day in the UK.
Yeah, the baby boomer generation, all sort of reaching retirement age over the next however many 10, 20 years.
Gen X.
No, baby boomers. These are. Oh, Gen X? No, Gen X. So anyway, it's people
Stupid labels.
Yeah, but people hitting that pivotal age when they are going into, as Carl refers to, the third act. The numbers are huge. The regulator rightly sees this as an area of focus because they want to ensure that the public gets good quality advice. And so what they tend to do is they go out and they choose randomly. In this case, 977 lucky firms were selected, and they asked them to complete a very detailed data submission. The link to it is in the paper, so you can see, had you have been one of the ones, what they would have asked you to provide. And I think it's worthwhile everyone taking a look at that and seeing how confident they would be with providing the data. They then went on to conduct desk-based reviews of files of 24 firms that were selected. The reading isn't particularly great, in all honesty. Bear in mind, this were files that were, I think I wanted, you submit your best possible file, knowing that the regulator were going to pull them apart and give you their views on them. Of the 24 firms, a third were found to be unsuitable. Either the advice was wrong, or it was bad, or there was missing information. So you could say, glass half full or glass half empty. 2/3 were good, well, fine, well, passed, but a third's pretty high, I would say, that weren't good. Interestingly, they do bang on about. You better get ready for that jingle, that drop again, Nick. They do bang on quite a lot about capacity for loss and have you making sure that you have managed that. But again, it's never prescriptive, which is right. You can talk about capacity for loss, capacity for volatility. We all do this. We might not specifically refer to it as that.
But sorry, Alan, we have a real-life example. March 2020, the market declined by minus 35% in 30 days. Everyone apparentlly's capacity for loss was triggered. What happened? Almost nothing for advised clients. Most portfolios are down 10, 15, 20, 25, 30% during that 30 days of decline. Everyone's capacity for loss was triggered according to some survey that they filled in. Yep. What happens with real clients? Almost nothing.
Sure.
Where's the people that are banging on about capacity for loss? What are they saying in hindsight about March 2020? Nothing. No article's been written.
All I would say to you and anyone else listening to this is just make sure that is documented. Your view is documented. You put that referencing some data or whatever on your client file, or you've got a generic company style approach. This is how we do it. They do talk interestingly about those who use model portfolios, be it in-house constructed ones or external. Have you got different ones for the decumulation? And they use the word decumulation, which is interesting because it wasn't really a word in the past, but it's now an official regulatory term. Decumulation.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. Only regulators and people in
but you're either in your
like
saving phase or in your spending phase. But have you got a different portfolio? But
exactly.
again, so we don't have a specifically different one, but we would have reasons as to why we don't have a different one. 10%, the most recent data is 2022, because I think we were asked this, and we talked about this in the past as well, that we couldn't find any recent data for how many people annuitized, because I think that was relating to the lifestyle profiling funds. 10% of at retirement market 2022 bought an annuity with their funds. So it's a very minor part of the market, but it's not nothing. is 10%.
Sorry, is that included? Is that the advised
No,
clients
I
only?
think it's across. I think it's all retail
It must be
products.
Yeah.
So within the report, as I say, it's worth reading. Go straight to the bits about examples of good practice, and definitely, I've sort of asked a few colleagues around here what they thought of it. We're generally comfortable. We're sort of nodding our heads, saying, "Yeah, we do that, we do that, we do that." There's a couple of things. Well, we could probably tighten up a little bit. We could be slightly better. Everything should be about small improvements as time goes on. So have a look at the examples of good practice. You see some of the some of the examples of bad practice are frankly embarrassing for a profession. I mean, some firms apparently just don't even have a register of the work they've done, the clients that they've, the products that they've recommended, and they can't provide any data around it without going into individual files one at a time and seeing what they did for the client at the time. No centralized data source, which is just, it's frankly ridiculous. But, going back to your point at the top of this particular section, Nick, they do talk through it. It's definitely not the core of this report, but they do talk about how they identified a number of areas where clients had been paying for ongoing advice and hadn't been receiving it. And that, I think, is the canary in the coal mine here. Talked about it before. We talked about the SJP case where they've had to effectively write down £500 million. This is huge. Again, anecdotally, I think all of us, I certainly have been involved with conversations with just advisors around the block for the last month or so about this. And I think it's huge. I think this whole thing is huge. And I just took back of an envelope calculations. So let's just take the SJP number. They're a big institutionalized company. They've got access to. Now, that's one of the reasons they discovered this, that people weren't getting
good systems,
reviews.
yeah.
And they estimate 5% of their clients hadn't been getting a review and had been paying for it. Hence, they've allocated £500 million to effectively repay them for the fees they paid for something that they never received. Apply that across to every firm or to a lot of firms in the country. Just to 5%, which I think is pretty modest, actually. I think that's a low assumption. Take the average advice. Just say the average advisor has got. I mean, the numbers vary quite a lot. I mean, some are ridiculously high. But if the average advisor has got about 100 clients, let's say they've been paying $3,000 a year as a fee. Say, for example, that's £15,000. But that's going to go back certainly post RDR. Let's call it 10 years. That's £15,000. Times 10, what's that? £150,000 per advisor compensation to be paid. You've got a firm with 10 advisors, you've got £1.5 million of fees. The numbers could be quite staggering, the impact that this could have in the advice sector.
Yeah,
what are you doing?
It is. I think it's going to be pretty
as I
big.
say, so this is not a thematic review, but it's something that's come out as a result through the SJP thing. And there are firms with more clients than SJP. I mean, I think, Carl, you might be mentioning something later on about another big firm that's been public about some of this stuff as well. So I think this is just, there's an underlying, I mean, I've heard from a couple of people that the legal profession are sort of licking their lips at the future revenue stream that they might get. How easy would it be to say to clients, have you been contacted? Have you had a full detailed review from which you've been paying for, but you didn't really forgot that you were paying for it, or we can get your fees back for the last 10 years. For you, that's a nice PPI style windfall. Here's £10,000 or £15,000 for you.
And where do the DFMs fall into this, Alan? Let's say they're charging 1.5-2% a year to create a bag of spanners investment portfolio that extracts wealth, and they can't prove that their funds are outperforming, a straightforward index.
That's different. There's no guarantee they are going to outperform. There's a large expectation they will underperform, but that's not what they are guaranteeing. So everything comes down to your terms of business or the terms that the client signed. And I think it's all a bit vague because often terms of business will be as minimalist as possible. We'll give you an annual review. We'll say something like that. What the body of the annual review looks like is vastly different. And I've talked about this in the past, looking at how much effort it takes for us as a firm. And we've done some analysis on it and the amount of time it takes for us to do an annual planning meeting. And it's a lot because it's a complex piece of work that research needs to go into. The meeting has to be held, the follow-ups. As a bare minimum, you've got to reconfirm the suitability of the advice that you gave 12 months before, 24 months, 10 years ago, whenever it is. You've got to annually reconfirm the suitability. In order to reconfirm the suitability, you need to know the client's circumstances and situation.
Yeah, you need to update everything.
You need to update everything. So, there is no question about it that there are thousands of people across the country who've been paying for advice and have been receiving either nothing or very sort of scant information. Nick.
Yes, I totally agree with that. There is also an element of the fee, however, that means that clients can phone us up and contact us at any time. It's like a retainer, isn't it? So we're not running the clock whenever we write to them or email or when they phone us in. So
some clients may or may not know that, Nick. They might have done a piece of business from years ago. And
if you're saying
with it,
I mean that would be part. That's I guess is a small part of it. We're on call whenever you want it. It's not what people pay. I wouldn't have expected.
No, but that's what we say to clients when we take them on board. People that don't operate this ongoing, proper, full fat financial planning type business model might not say that. They might say, done your ISAs, done your pensions, goodbye. And they're still taking a fee on it. I mean, there's so many...
You know what's quite interesting as well, and again, this came out, just the stuff about SJP, but it applies to many, many others and other conversations I've had. It's interesting because we don't take much of an onboarding fee, an upfront initial cost. Sometimes we take zero, and sometimes it's relatively small. The default model is 3%. That's it. You take 3% of assets.
I just cannot believe.
There's a huge incentive to onboard clients and take 3% of their wealth as an initial
and provide no service
fee, and then that's it. And again, the SJP thing was all about incentives, and people were getting rewarded, and people were having big celebration days and things like that and it was just, it's, as somebody referred to it, and there's lots of big organizations like this, it's institutional asset gathering, where all the incentives are onboarding assets. And then you just want to keep them on board, and we're doing as little as possible. So commercially, you want to do as little as possible because there's more profit in doing that. But legally, you're expected to do something. Nick.
It's funny, but it's because, our business models here, I don't charge for the initial financial plan. I don't charge for the onboarding because the value to me is in the ongoing relationship with the client for which they are paying me, for which I provide an ongoing service. So that's the bit that I absolutely focus on. It's completely inverted to the asset gathering kind of model.
But that's why, Nick, that scaling a financial planning firm is bloody hard.
Yeah.
That's why we have to hire more staff, because we've committed to proper, real, full financial planning. So you got to deliver the service. So the SJPs of this world who are trying to reinvent themselves to offer this, it ain't going to be easy. It is not going to be easy.
Well, profit margins are going to be hit hugely as a result, because bottom line, you need more time, more people, just more resources to deliver this stuff.
Yeah, lots of expertise as well.
It's not, it must have been a gravy train for some of these companies. If you can onboard clients and take 0.5% or 1% a year of their generally growing assets and send out an annual valuation statement or something, whatever was being done.
Probably. Or not, as we'll talk about in a second. Just send out login details.
Yeah. I'm just conscious that we're three-quarters of an hour on this. But apparently, Carl, some people don't even need advice anyway, do they?
Yeah, so this is an article that I came across during the week. I'm actually not that familiar with this firm. It's a UK-based firm, True Potential. I have heard of them, but you guys will be a lot more familiar. But their CEO was interviewed, and he said most clients don't need advice, right? Just straight out there, he was quoted saying, "It's very rare our clients need advice." That's exactly what he said. And so then when you kind of read on in the article, it says, they use their inverted commas in-house technology to deliver the service to the clients. They have 1.4 million clients. They charge 0.5% for an ongoing advice fee, where they've already said there is no ongoing advice. That Andrew actually did read this, right? So, and we were laughing about this earlier on. The most frequent inquiry they get is, what are my login details? Right? And,
not am I on track for retirement?
Yeah, wow, this is an incredible thing for anybody to say. And he goes on then to lament RDR and that it was very bad. And, it was great to have all these commissions, and there's 8,000 less advisors in the UK. When I read that last bit, I went, this dude should come to Ireland. He'd absolutely love it here. He really would.
As Alan said when we were discussing just hitting the record button, it's like a Gerald Ratner moment, isn't it? This guy said the quiet part out loud.
I can't believe he's said this on stage.
But it was proudly said. Odd. It was like, this is now look, we gotta kind of understand and appreciate that there are different business models, and that is a very different business model. But for me, when somebody with 1.4 million clients says something like that, I go, we're going to be around for an awful long time to come. Because like our advice fee, our ongoing advice fee for our top level of clients is 0.5%. His firm do absolutely nothing for that money. Absolutely nothing. They give them login details. That's what he said, that they don't need advice and they give login details.
And also, I think they charge for their platform as well. They're a vertically integrated firms. They charge for funds as well. So it's not just the 0.5 that's quoted. Again, I don't know the numbers well enough, but I believe that's how they charge.
I think he may be getting, or his advisors may be getting a few letters in the next few weeks from the ombudsman or whoever else. By the way, on this, I also learned that, imagine you did have, and you realized there was, 100 or whatever thousand clients for whom you actually owed them to be repaid because they didn't get any advice for years. That's not a PI claim. You can't claim that through your insurance. That's something you're going to have to find the funds for yourself. That is just an omission of professional services, which you're going to have to find.
To be fair to this firm and this article I refer to, right, they're very clear on what they do, right? So I don't think there'll be any ambiguity. I don't think they'll have much of a problem saying,
we give you access to an online portal.
We told you exactly what you were getting for this money. I'm telling you again. I'm just going to remind everyone this is what you're getting, which is pretty much. Now he does say in the article, if people do want advice, of course we do have advisors, but it's very rare our clients need advice.
1.4 million. Wow.
They are very
bizarre.
Slick. They are. I know some advisors who are with TP, and their system is very slick in terms of it's all very tech driven. They do have to go through a compliance, everything. You can't go to the next stage of a client onboarding until you've done all these blah, 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 blah. Everything's done. So in terms of getting clients on board, they are probably, as good as any other firm out there. But interesting. Wow. Okay. Listen, guys, 47 minutes for the love of God. Should we move on to the meat and potatoes?
Yeah.
And this kind of ties in with the overall theme of this show about ongoing service and being careful about what you're promising people and the kind of people that you take on and convert from being prospects to being clients. I saw a LinkedIn post from a young IFA, owns his own financial planning business. He founded it, Orca Wealth. The guy's name is Tom Morgan. I'm going to read it out, so just bear with me. Tom says, last week I had 3 separate conversations with new prospects and I didn't convert any of them. Am I the worst closer in the world? The problem is they wanted one-off transactional style advice. Their inquiries all went along the same lines and all started with, I just want this. And I'm here to offer a full financial planning service. And I'll give you everything I've got to drive the most value to you, but you need to be open-minded and wholeheartedly engaged in it. Otherwise, it's not a good fit for either of us. And then Tom closes by saying, well, maybe I didn't do a good enough job of pitching the massive benefits proper financial planning delivers. Or maybe I dodged a square peg round hole client relationship that wouldn't have worked for anybody. What do you think? Anyone here in a sales role have a similar experience? And interesting, there's a whole range of comments. It's quite a lot of participation in that 19 comments in that on that piece from Tom Morgan. And some people were saying, yeah, just stick to what you're doing. You're absolutely right. Other people were other extremes saying, no, you adapt your service to the clients. And if clients want something, you can give it to them. Just make sure you cost it on an hourly basis, like accountants or lawyers. And I just want to, I just think, it probably won't surprise the Trappists, it won't surprise the Trap Pack. I think this guy is totally right to do what he's doing. And you do not tailor your service to the clients. It's like, I think David Hearn, who's a friend of the show, said in a comment, you don't go to a fantastic restaurant with an a la carte menu and then just demand fish and chips that's not on there and go into the kitchen to start knocking out fish and chips just because you want it. It doesn't work like that. And I think, Tom Morgan, I think you're absolutely right to stick to full financial planning. Transactional, it's all very well to say you're going to do transactional advice. You're going to time cost it for somebody. Okay, so I've got $100,000 I want invested. I want you to tell me how to invest it. Now, the 4 of us here and many of our listeners would say, Oh, that's interesting. You've got 100 grand to invest. How come you worked out? How come it's 100 grand you need to invest? And what return do you need to get on that? Can you show me the financial plan that tells me you need to invest 100k? Because then I can maybe help work out the appropriate asset mix for your portfolio to give the return you need. And the client's going, no, I don't need all that. I don't need to. I want to invest 100 grand. Already at that first point, you've hit a massive pothole in the road. And then if you're charging on a time basis, well, okay, all right, we're not going to do the financial plan. I'm just going to recommend an investment for you. I know it's going to be, and this is not advice to anyone listening, it's going to be Vanguard Global All Share. There you go. And my fee for that is £12,000 or whatever, £5,000, whatever. And they're going to go, well, hold on, that took you 15 seconds to recommend that. Yeah, because it's taken me 30 years to work out exactly what you need. And that's my expertise you're paying for. If you want to do one-off. So what I'm trying to say is one-off transactional advice. And also that you can bet your bottom dollar that if you give one-off transactional investment advice to that client, no matter how many disclaimers you say, saying, I'm never going to contact you again, if that fund has a temporary decline and the client sells out because you're not on their shoulder giving them the coaching advice, and they sell and turn a paper loss into a real one, they will try and come back to you and they will try it on. So I'm absolutely against this thing about doing transactional stuff and adapting your service. Well done, Tom. Stick to what you do. Stick to your knitting. Take on those clients that fit your model. There's more than enough for everybody out there. Have an abundance mindset. And do not be just. You've turned away 3 people. It just means there'll be 3 people next week that'll come. That'll just be perfect for you because that's kind of the way the universe works, I think. Any thoughts on that, gents? Alan?
Yeah, couple of things. Interesting. I was contacted by a journalist a couple of days ago for my comments on a situation that he'd come across whereby a potential client had contacted an advisor, and the advisor was making a recommendation. The advisor recommended a portfolio of active investment funds. The client said, no, I want passive or index funds. And the advisor said, well, we don't really do that. This is what we've got. And so apparently went back and forward, and the advisor's final recommendation was, well, I'll tell you what, we'll do 50% active, 50% passive. Alan, what do you think about that? And I said, it's a nonsense. I said, it's ridiculous. It's like me going to a doctor and say, I've got some sort of ailment, and the doctor prescribes something, and I say, no, I don't want that. I want something else. Give me something else, doctor, because I've got a preference. Doesn't matter. The active passive is a sideshow to this. It's just if you're an experienced professional, you don't get dictated to by your client. If you're a client who wants to dictate the outcome of it, then you find an advisor who will has got the same philosophy as you. So I think if the same sort of circumstances, if I was the advisor in those situations, I say, well, that fundamentally challenges our underlying investment philosophy. I'd like to explain to you why. I'd maybe articulate that. And it could be for active versus passive or whatever the story was. I'll explain that. And if you still fundamentally disagree, then we're not the right firm for you. I think that's the thing. The other thing, though, broadening out the conversation that came up on LinkedIn. One of the challenges genuinely is that financial planning is it's experiential, right? You don't really know what it is until you experience it. No one does. The smartest people don't really know. Even if sometimes we do get clients coming to us and talking about a financial plan because they've read an article or something about it. I think that sounds like a good thing to have. But unless you've done it and had it done with you, for you, proactively, collaboratively, with an experienced professional doing it, you don't really know the benefits. And no one really ever comes in and asks for that experience because they don't know what it's like. So how do you win people across? You can talk to transactional people. We don't do transactional work. What we do is we do quite a lot of work, potentially, if it looks like it's a potential, not a complete just tire kicker type person, but if it looks like somebody that we could potentially work with, we're convinced we could add a lot of value to them, we'll do a fair amount of work speculatively on the basis that let's let them experience it. We will do a financial plan, a fairly basic, it won't be deep in the weeds of the detail, but it will be personalized to them. It will show their circumstances today. It will show a few, forward forecasts, maybe a couple of scenarios that may or may not be in their sort of future life. And then we, after that sort of 1, maybe 2 meetings, we say, look, this is the sort of work we do in great detail. And almost always they become clients. There's only a handful. And that's the reason that we can commercially afford to do that, to do work for free upfront, is because I use the example of, it's like if you're going to buy a car, you want to take it for a test drive. If you're going to buy a house, you go and look at the house. You go and look at it a few times. You imagine yourself living in that house. You don't just look at a house on a website and say, that'll do for me. So you've got to meet your potential clients somewhat. You can't just say, we don't do transactional work, buy. Well, you can, but that's not necessarily worthwhile. I think the use of case studies can be helpful as well. If you've got a range of case studies and you can see this client, this potential guy or girl is a bit like this person we worked with before. Here's an example of the work we did. Here's the impact, and this is what happened. You can encourage them to do that. And the last thing that we've got kind of up our sleeve, rarely use it, but if you think this could be very worthwhile to us, the client doesn't quite get it yet, we offer a fee guarantee. If within 6 months of us working with you, you feel that we've delivered zero value to you, I'll refund all the fees we've taken, our fees that we've taken from you. Therefore, that is now a zero risk decision for the client. And frankly, some of my colleagues were a bit worried about doing that at one point, but I thought, do you know what? If someone's told us that we've delivered no value to them, having worked with us for 6 months, they are trouble. And I'd rather get them out of our life early because because there's no way you could say we've added no value. You just couldn't. If we delivered on our sort of normal services. So all of a sudden you've moved that from being, I want this or we don't do this, to saying, hang on a minute, let's test it out. Let's run it for a bit. Let's build you a plan. Let's get you to really feel and experience and understand what we do. And then let's get you on board. And if you think it's a waste of time, I'll give you all your money back. You've wasted nothing other than perhaps a bit of time, but you've certainly learned a lot. And I'd love to hear, why you felt it was of no value. That's never happened, not one single time. But as I say, it de-risks the situation for the client. But back to the original point, wholeheartedly agree with Tom, who said we don't do this. But as I say, there's probably a bit of a middle ground between a blank, we don't do it, and something else. Carl.
Yeah. Do you want me to go, Nick?
Just a second. The other thing I'd meant to say as well is that when you onboard clients just for one-off transactions, they're so expensive. The time you spend, the fact-finding, the suitability letter, just for one-off. You can never charge enough to make that anything other than vomit-inducing. Sorry, Carl, crack on.
Yeah, no, fair point. I'm with Alan on this though, right? I would be a little bit more commercial maybe about it, right? And I suppose my main feeling on this is go and meet the clients where they're at. Okay. So, I know you don't agree, Nick, but hear me out, right? So if we have someone referred into us who wants, who has been told by somebody else, oh, they do this financial planning thing, it's awesome, right? Or a center of influence, they do this financial planning thing, you need to go through the process. That's easy peasy. But then we do get people who, come in straight up and go, I've got a pension and I want to know what pension fund it should go into. So we'll meet them where they're at, but we'll do exactly what Alan says. We'll do a basic financial plan. Good example, client come in, 3 years to go to retirement. I want to invest in a tracker bond that's going to give me a guaranteed return of 8%. I'm making up that number, right? And it's like, wow, we're definitely not doing that. But can we just explain and show you exactly where we would see this going and what you need to do, and explain that actually in your head, you're going to retire at 60 and take your lump sum. But if we do a financial plan, I can demonstrate that actually you're a 40-year investor. So it's to meet them where they're at with their particular pain point, and then try and almost slowly flip it on its head to show exactly why you need the financial plan. And I think that's really important, as opposed to being perhaps, Nick, the way you're doing it, which is not doing it. Like, we would have no interest whatsoever in transactional business. We will turn it away if it's absolutely clear that it's just going to be transaction. No, not happening. But we will, exactly as Alan said, you will try and bring them on the journey. And I think this is the biggest challenge for all of us doing real financial planning, which is it's an experience that you need to go through. And the wow moment or the aha moments come at the end, right? Yeah. When you've overlaid all of the income and assets and all of that kind of stuff on your plan, and the red is either there, and then you do what if scenarios. That's when you go, oh, wow. And, it's difficult to get that feeling, to give that feeling to a potential client who's not familiar with financial planning, by just explaining kind of what you do. You need to go through the process. So I think using the particular pain point that client has, and using that as the key or the core or the main theme of your financial plan, I think that's how you bring it all around. And that's how you explain this is why a holistic view, an overall helicopter view, is required. So I maybe not as draconian, and no, it's not happening for that guy who said he turned away 3 clients. I don't obviously know the particulars of the 3 cases, but maybe if he was a little bit softer and took a little bit of extra time. Now, maybe Alan's firm and our firm, maybe we can afford to do, as Alan called it, speculative work, and maybe do a couple of meetings before we kind of bring people around. Maybe that's the case. But yeah, that's generally speaking my views on it.
Okay, I'll finish off. Really good point. That is the reality, isn't it? As Carl alluded to, people seek advice when money's in flow. They've received an inheritance, divorce, sold a business, retirement's happening. They very rarely say, I need lifestyle, financial planning, using financial forecasts, and I need you to be my strategic thinking partner for the next 25 years. That's what's going to happen, hopefully. But they obviously don't come to us seeking that. Back to basics, it depends on what firm you work for. It depends if you're an employee in a firm and you have a certain way of working, be that transactional or ongoing or a mix of two. If you run your own business, again, it's the beauty of running your own business. You can create your own business nirvana, whatever that is for you. I do no pension and investment transactional work for all the reasons that Nick's mentioned. I believe my value is in the ongoing work. Therefore, I work with clients on an ongoing basis. You don't get fit, go and see a personal trainer once. I think it takes a couple of years to get people's financial house fully in order. I mean, yes, there's about 5 or 6 big things we need to do in the next 3 months, but then there's 35 tiny things we need to do in the next 3 years. So again, I'm not going to achieve that just by doing transactional work. As the CEO of True Potential says, there's only 20,000 good financial advisors left. There's clients falling out the trees. So, back to Tom's point, it basically is just next client. You decline 3 clients because they don't fit your service. Hopefully 3 come around the next week. The only one-off work I do insurance one-off, life insurance, income protection, critical illness, if it's a client or a friend or person I know somewhat well, because I'm a fan of people having the right insurance in place. And I also do care annuities as one-off work. That's a bit of a niche that I do, but everything else is ongoing. So yeah, good luck to you, Tom, in finding clients that want to work with people on an ongoing basis. I like the points that you guys have mentioned about basically a loss leader, which is basically what you're saying. You invest a small amount just to show them the service, etc. So I can imagine a lot more people doing that. That's it.
You see, the thing is, and I'm remembering a couple of examples where we have, had that early stage conversation with potential clients, and I'm just doing the same thing. People who either thought they didn't really need our services or speculative, maybe one-off type things. And I remember a guy saying to me a couple of years ago, once we'd done a sort of deep dive discovery meeting, asked him all the details you would ask him about, all the soft facts and stuff. And then we built this outline financial plan. And I'll never forget it. He said to me, are you guys, he was all, curious, are you guys IFAs? I said, well, yeah, that's the kind of generic term. Because, well, I had an IFA before. I needed to do my ISA. So there's an assumption that that's what IFAs do. Pensions and ISAs recommendations. And the experience he had with us was just so different to that. And it would be the same with any of you guys. And any real financial planner out there. It was so different that he couldn't join the dots between the two. So he thought he was coming speaking to us, and he just had a significant liquidity event around selling a business. And he thought, oh, I didn't know that IFAs did this stuff, because this stuff I want, but I didn't know what it was, because I thought IFAs just did investment recommendations. So that was quite interesting. The other point about this, of course, is that a good ongoing relationship is all about kind of looking over the horizon at what's coming down and being proactive and organizing and optimizing for circumstances. There's always something changing. As you know, the capital gains tax rules in the UK have changed recently, are changing. There's numerous things, the pension rules change all the bloody time, etc. So you want someone on your side who's kind of looking proactively that next year this is going to happen, or this rule will change, etc., and making those changes proactively, as opposed to, oh, it's happened, it's too late, you can't do that anymore.
I think also client demographic is something to do with it. I could be assuming here, but Tom might have been speaking to younger clients that are not motivated like older clients approaching retirement. Our perfect sweet spot for clients is early 50s, approaching retirement, they're motivated, they want to fix their retirement problem, their retirement income problem. They know they can't do it themselves and they're going to seek an advisor. When you try and pitch proper financial planning to people in their late 30s, early 40s, again, they're not really motivated to do it. So our perfect clients are clients on the approach to retirement, ideally business owners. So again, it's the client demographic that you're also pitching to, I think is quite important.
I just read the article on LinkedIn. I was reading the comments below. I was trying to work out where Tom got these prospects from. The important point to make here is that if your business is mature and you're developing, you get new prospects from referrals. I imagine it's very rare that you're going to get people coming to you for transactional stuff, because the people that are referring you, your existing clients, are the ones you're doing the full fat financial planning for. And so you're likely to get more of those. So I imagine maybe Tom got these from Unbiased or what have you as well, which I get as well. When you're starting off and you're young, you'll get business from whatever source you can. So, all right. Have we given that a damn good thrashing? We comfortable with that? Yes, Carl is nodding, and it's Carl I defer to in all these matters. And with perfect timing, actually, I'm glad we've drawn an end to the meat and potatoes, because at the front door of Lincoln Lodge is Posty, and she's dragged the bulging sack up my drive of Trappist questions. Dear Trappists, once an episode we answer typically now one question from our Trappists, sent in via the pinned link at the top of our Twitter profile @Advisor Podcast. We are getting through them slowly and surely. And this one is from... Now, who is this one from here? Let's just open up the letter. This is from Stephen S., who's on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, as @PassiveVanguard. Dear Musketeers, I want to take a moment to express my gratitude for the invaluable insights and discussions on Trap. It's become a ritual for me to pour a very long drink and settle in to listen to your engaging conversation on personal finance. On to my query. Christ for that. In a general investment account, I've come across varying views regarding the choice between distribution/income funds and accumulation funds. Some say that a distributing option may be preferable for those seeking income without triggering capital gains, assuming one never sells. I'm curious about your perspective on this. Do you generally advise clients to opt for distribution/income funds or accumulation funds in such scenarios? Apologies in advance for the technical question. Thanks again for your time and for the knowledge you share on the podcast. Thank you, Stephen. Andy, do you want to go first? Should we tell him? You're muted.
Andrew, you're muted.
Oh, rookie. All of my portfolios are income portfolios. Yep, for the point you've mentioned on general investment accounts, so I don't have to trigger a CGT if we're taking a certain amount of income, but it's reviewed every year with clients. The fees are taken from the income that's distributed, so there's a certain amount of cash in the cash account in all of the portfolios. And every year I do a rebalance. I wash some of the cash into the worst performing funds. So yeah, I use income units in GIAs. I think you do the same, don't you, Nick? Over to you.
Yeah, so this just
You're
applies
muted,
to general
Nick. You're
investment
muted.
accounts. Get lost. Yeah, I use income funds in GIAs for that reason. But as Alan alluded to, the capital gains allowance has gone from 12,100. It's going down to £3,000, isn't it? From a couple of weeks' time. It's like an 80% decline in the allowance. So it's definitely become more front of mind. And I use income funds, Stephen, in the GIA just so we have cash coming in. I don't just sell funds down to pay for the ongoing fees. That's the reason why. But I do then just do monthly sales of the units to generate a de facto income. But obviously, I'll have to keep an eye on that going forward, and maybe we'll change how we look at GIAs to try and keep the CGT manageable. At least the rates of CGT are still very benign, really, on the 18 and 28% or 10% and 18%. It's not
20.
It's not yet a significant issue, but it's something I will be looking at. That's quite a technical explanation. I don't know if Carl or Alan got anything to add to that. No? Okay, fine. Sorry, Stephen, we kind of fudged our answers there between myself and Andrew. Okay, let's move on. No further ado to what many people call Culture Corner. Wow.
Carl, you're first, mate, with the podcast recommendation.
Let him hang.
Okay. I know what this one is. I think. What's the podcast called again?
The Long
So I
Tall.
came across I came, long-term investing podcast or something like that by
Carl Richards.
Peter Lazaroff. But it's a particular episode he does with Carl Richards, where actually Carl Richards talks through or explains his most famous sketches. It's really, really good. And then I went through this show a little bit more, and he's like got some really good short episodes explaining a lot of the concepts we talk about a lot. So definitely well worth for any younger advisors coming in. I think this one will be really brilliant. But there was one particular episode, not the one I've shared. The Carl Richards one is really good, but I think it's 5 reasons you need a financial plan that have nothing to do with money. And I think it's 11 minutes long. And I shared it with the private client managers here. It's just really, really good stuff. And, you know, it's really short, really sharp. So yeah, it's a really good find, this podcast. But I've only listened to, I think, 4 episodes. So the longer one, the Carl Richards one, and then some shorter ones, which I thought were really good. So yeah, big recommendation, that one from me.
Love it. Great stuff.
Very good. As you guys know, Carl Richards is a
Close personal friend
personal
of yours.
friend. Did you see that clip that I shared with you? So he was on
Kitsis.
on the Kitsis
God.
podcast, and he talks about one of his favorite human beings on the planet. Me!
That only cost Alan $7,500.
Yeah, absolute bargain. No, that's a good podcast. So Carl and Kitsis show where they just chew the fat.
I'm sure you watched that and repeat all weekend, didn't you?
Yeah. Sent it to all my friends.
4 minutes 07. Go to 4 minutes 07, darling. Go to 4 minutes 07, darling.
YouTube Shorts.
Yeah, it's good. My contribution this week is an app called Mentorist. Link in the show notes. I've dabbled in the past with book summary apps like Blinkist and others, which are okay. Don't love it. They're okay. There are some books that I'm not sure whether I should sort of invest the time and energy to get into them. So a book summary can be quite useful to sort of cut to the chase and get to the point. And if you think actually this is really, really good or interesting, by all means go and read the full book. But Mentorist takes a slightly different take on it. I've often thought about, you read these nonfiction books and there's often some good ideas. And yes, Nick and I use something called Readwise, and it sort of resurfaces all the highlights that you've highlighted in the past. But there isn't necessarily any follow-up or any specific actions that you might choose to do. I try to do things sort of myself, but Mentorist, what it does is get all the best books you've ever heard of, all the best sort of nonfiction books are listed there. But part of the process is it will give you a task or a project or a thing to do. If you like the key ideas that came from reading that book, it will say, here's something to go and do now in the next week, which will help you sort of understand, embed, and learn the key points of this book. The app is actually free, provided you don't do like loads of them. But for me, if I was doing one a week, that would be more than enough for me to do. So it's free. And if you pay for the full thing, it's only $14.99, which is a lot cheaper than Blinkist, which I think is at least 70 or 90 pounds per year. That's per year, I should say, $14.99 for an annual thing. So Mentorist, if you like personal development and learning and acting on some of these great books that are out there and executing on some of the key learns from them, check it out. That's it.
Okie dokie. I am reading a book. I haven't finished it yet, but I am actually reading it. So I am consuming it. I'm about halfway through on Kindle. I've fallen back in love with Kindle. I'm probably going to let my Audible subscription lapse, actually. It's a book called The Fund. The Fund. And it's about Ray Dalio and Bridgewater. It's an unauthorized account of Bridgewater and Ray Dalio. My brother-in-law gave me a book a few years ago called Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order, Why Nations Succeed and Fail by Ray Dalio. And I got about a chapter in and thought, well, this is just garbage and it's unreadable. But just him prognosticating about what's going to happen next based on trends and so forth. And I just thought, the sunken cost fallacy, I'm quite strict now with books. If I'm not enjoying it after I put the book down and go on to the next book. I used to plow through thinking I've got to commit to this. There must be something in this. And then you've wasted years of your life getting through a book you never really enjoy. So I sent it back to my brother-in-law. The Fund is a really interesting read. Listen, Bridgewater at times past has superb performance. 2 funds, the Something Alpha Fund and the All Weather Fund are the 2 main funds. But a lot of that past performance is in the past. It's not been so clever recently. And I know he's having some trouble with some pension funds in the US who are pulling out of Bridgewater. But he's a highly successful guy. He's probably the most well-known hedge fund manager in the world. He's had massive remuneration from Bridgewater. In certain years, he earns 3 or 4 billion US dollars. That's his income from Bridgewater. But this book is revealing. He has these principles. I think it's just hubris. This is a guy who has grown a magnificent firm based on performance, which is pretty in the past, and he doesn't come across particularly likable. It's a very much a culty kind of place, and he just dominates it. He has all these he codifies it in these rules called principles, how people will behave, and it's not just at work; it's a whole thing for life. And he has this grading. Everyone's grading each other all the time at Bridgewater. All the staff have these scorecards, and you go around compiling them, and it's just really micromanaging to the nth degree, and he's not very happy about this book being published.
We should do that for each other. What do you think?
Oh my God, can you imagine? Well, we know what we're going to do. It's like, we can cut to the chase. We all think we're rubbish.
Can we get minus numbers, please?
So the fund is an interesting, and it's his story as well. It's his life story. So it's interesting. The fund, I'm going through it at a great lick. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, the fund about Ray Dalio, I recommend that you get that.
I did enjoy Principles, the first book. I think you're talking about maybe the second one that came out.
It's not that one. Yeah,
he's got quite a nice voice, easy to listen to on Audible. I'm a bit of a fan of it.
Does he read it himself?
I didn't enjoy Principles, and interestingly, Nick, a client of mine rocked into his review with that book and gave me a hard copy of it, but I haven't read it yet. So,
well, the fund.
But yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, it's very good. I mean, it's good.
The message is getting through that we should be doing indexing, and look, here's the reason we're not doing active management and whatever. It's really cool.
No, he's the performance-wise, they have struggled. They have struggled. And just sorry, reading the book, he's famous for getting certain bets right, but he's made so many bets wrong. But he just keeps on making the next bet, and then suddenly, like a stop clock, he's right. And then he gives them all the kudos and he's back on it, sort of thing. So interesting. Okay, we have one more culture corner.
This is a blog post on the website quillet.com. It's entitled The 7 Laws of Pessimism. If life is better than ever before, why does the world seem so depressing? I recommend you read it. It's got 7 key points in it. Share it with a few of your clients if you wish to. That's it. Back to you, boss.
Very good. I actually listened to the Quillet podcast. It's a decent podcast. A Canadian guy called Jonathan Kay runs it. Comes from a sort of centrist leftist position, but he's switched on, and it's an eclectic mix of people from around the world on the Quillet podcast.
Got the Nick Lincoln seal of approval, so
there you go. Nothing better, Andrew. That is the gold imprimatur for that kind of thing. Okay, listen, we're at 77 minutes, and I don't think the tech has collapsed. Alan's left the recording and come back. I did get a message pop up about that, but I'm sure it's going to be fine. So, dear Trappist, that is a wrap for episode 42. 42, the answer to life, the universe, and everything can be found in this episode of Trap. Thank you for your time. Please do give us a review. Don't just give us a review, though. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. And that way, every other week, every Thursday morning, it arrives on your phone, freshly cooked. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Tick that annoying bell so we can just pop up continually on the screen. We're at 670-something now subscribers on YouTube. Only 330 away from the magic 1,000. Until then, Trap Pack, it's adios from us. And Trappists, you take care out there, and we will be with you in 2 weeks' time. Goodbye, and get out of my computer. Go on, you lot. Sod off.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Under 10 tickets left for Trap Live, so grab one of the final tickets.
Ooh.
Details, including a link to the purchase tickets. Fuck.
And the lovely TLP, dear Trappist, I'll chat up for her. She was out of the house this morning at 2:30 a.m. to be at her school for 3:30 a.m. to get a coach down to Dover. She's in Normandy with the Rugrats looking at the battlefield beaches of World War II. So I've got the house to myself. Goodbye, everybody. I should stop recording now before I get myself in trouble. Penelope, I love you. And that's the end.